Health, an initiative of Qatar Foundation. I'd like to welcome you to this important side session on quality over quantity, how parental decisions are impacting fertility. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers, Doha International Family Institute, Permanent Mission of the State of Qatar, and UNFPA for inviting me to take part in this session. To deliver the opening remarks, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jassim Al-Ma'awdha, Deputy Representative, Permanent Mission of the State of Qatar to the UN. It seems we've lost Mr. Jassim. Maybe we'll come back to him in a moment. I think we should forge on. So birth rates are falling globally. Current fertility rates indicate that nearly every country around the world could start experiencing shrinking populations by the end of this century. Some nations, including the likes of Spain and Japan, are even expected to see their populations decrease by half. But why are declining birth rates a problem? The number of children under the age of 5 is expected to fall from 681 million to 401 million by 2100, while the number of people over the age of 80 will increase dramatically from 141 million to an expected 866 million by 2100. This imbalance will undoubtedly create enormous social changes for governments across the world as they grapple with public finances. In addition, when discussing fertility, are we looking closely enough at the male perspective? For example, why are men choosing to have fewer children? And what are the social and economic factors that govern their decision-making? These are all questions I'm sure many of us would like to hear something about today. To discuss these challenges and some of the policies and mitigation strategies that countries have begun to implement to fight this global decline in fertility, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts. But first of all, I think we'll go back to Mr. Jassim, and hopefully we can get some opening remarks from you.
First, I'd like to welcome you all. On behalf of Ambassador Alia Ahmed Saif Al Thani and the Permanent Representative of the State of Qatar, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this side event on how parental decisions are impacting fertility, organized on the occasion 55th session of the Commission on Population and Development, organized by the Permanent Mission of the State of Qatar to the United Nations, the Doha International Family Institute, a member of Qatar Foundation for Education, Science and Community Development, and the Regional Office of Arab States of UNFPA. I'm delighted that today we have with us the representatives of the two distinguished Qatari organizations who are leading worldwide cutting-edge research and outreach activities on some of these issues. Dr. Sharifa Na'man Al-Amadi, Executive Director of the Doha International Family Institute, and Ms. Sultana Afdal, Chief Executive Officer of the World Innovation Summit for Health, known as WISH, also part of Qatar Foundation. I now give the floor to Ms. Sultana Afdal, Chief Executive of the WISH, who will moderate the event. In her current role, Ms. Sultana has been instrumental in promoting healthcare innovation globally, not least by working closely with WHO on a variety of initiatives. So without further ado, I pass the word to Ms. Sultana. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Jassim. Wonderful. So I'd like to start with Dr. George Leeson, Professional Fellow at the Oxford Institute of Population Aging. Professor George Leeson is a visiting professor of demography at the University of Guanajuato, Leon in Mexico, and a professional fellow at the Institute of Popular Aging, where he coordinates the Latin American Research Network on Aging, LARNA, and the Central Eastern Europe Research Network on Aging, EAST. George's main research interests are in the socio-demographic aspects of aging populations, covering both demographic modeling of population development and the analysis of national and international datasets. He directed the Danish longitudinal future study, which elucidates the attitudes and aspirations of future generations of older people in Denmark. He is principal investigator with Professor Sarah Harper on the Global Aging Study, a survey of 44,000 men and women aged 40 to 80 in 24 countries. George's current research includes the demographic inequalities of global aging, the changing populations of Europe and Latin America, migration and migrants in Europe, causes and consequences of depopulation in Central and Eastern Europe, and future prospects of longevity. So, Dr. Leeson, statistics show that global average fertility rates have dropped dramatically from 5 children per woman in 1968 to 2.5% into 2.5 in 2017. This trend has pushed countries to change their fertility policies, like China dropping its one-child policy in 2016, and other countries to incentivize pregnancies, like in South Korea. Is this global phenomenon of falling birth rates really that worrying? What are some of the most likely social and economic repercussions of this? Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sultana. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to participate and those kind words of introduction. It's interesting how falling levels of childbearing tend to come into the debate about demographic development every now and again. I think what we should remember is that falling levels of childbearing are nothing new in certain regions of the world. So I sit here in Oxford in Europe, and fertility began falling here probably about 200 years ago as part of what demographers call the demographic transition. And that was a response to changing conditions, both health conditions, housing conditions, in particular levels of mortality. And families realized that it was no longer necessary to have big families. What we've seen in more recent decades, however, is that what was a high-income country phenomenon, i.e. low levels of childbearing, has spread across the world into regions and countries where, quite frankly, I think a lot of people were shocked that it was happening, and that it was happening so quickly. And I think that is one of the challenges for governments and for communities and families, that it is happening so quickly. But you ask, is it a problem? Of course, in the very, very, very long term, if our levels of childbearing remain below replacement level, then globally, population will begin to decrease. However, I think it's important, wherever we are, that we look at the situation there, and we look at what are the conditions that are forcing, in a way, governments to ask themselves, how do we encourage people to have more children? And why is that an issue? There may be other ways of addressing that issue. You mentioned in passing that I work at in the introduction, that I work at the Institute of Population Aging here at the University of Oxford. And we look at population aging holistically and all of the drivers behind that. And of course, population aging is also, it's not just a result of us all living longer and relatively healthy lives. It's also a result of declining levels of fertility. And we need to look at this bigger picture before deciding where we need to intervene if necessary, and how we can then intervene if necessary.
Sorry, it seems I'm muted. Thank you, Professor. I did allude to it at the beginning, but demographically, it's such a complex issue in terms of every country is grappling with reasons why fertility is falling. For example, if we look at Europe, it's people pursue their career, and there are financial considerations. In places like Qatar, it could be a cultural reason, and there are many other reasons, obviously. So that's why I alluded to men. I think sometimes that demographic is kind of missed out. People think a woman is a driver of this decision. Sometimes it's overwhelmingly a man isn't just ready to have children. So is there one line that would fit all? Because as I said, in every country, every area, the reasons that govern these decisions are mostly or sometimes very regional. So what can one do in terms of government policies that you have seen that has worked in many countries or could work around the world? Sorry, I've put you on the spot, I know, but I just wonder if there's something specific.
No, that's fine. It's very specific. It's very interesting. It's a very important question. I'm not sure I've seen very many policies that have worked in this respect, and policies that have worked in terms of demographics. Demographics are a complex, as you say, it's a very complex issue. And policies that have been introduced to try and shape a demographic, and particularly a future demographic, quite frankly, have not always been beneficial, and have had much more detrimental longer-term effects, and have, in some cases, been quite draconian.
Have you felt that there is something governments have done particularly well in terms of incentivizing better birth rates, and would that be something that you think could be, cookie cutted and used in different countries?
Yeah. I mean, you asked for a one-liner.
Yes. Sorry.
I think the most important issue here is about choice and empowerment. And I think it's important that governments do not look at this simply as an issue of, oh my goodness, in a way I cannot believe in the 21st century that we're hearing governments say we need to get women back home having more children. I do actually find that quite disturbing. But I think if we enable choice and we empower not just women, but as you say, Sultana, men are also, whether we like it or not, they are a parameter in this equation. And we need to enable them to be able to make the choices that then enable them to have the sorts of family sizes that they would like to have.
Yeah.
Now that does also, sorry if I may, just finally, that does also mean we have to accept that there will be a lot of families in a lot of places around the world who say, we don't actually want to have very many children. For very personal, very familial reasons. I think we have to respect that. And as I said a little earlier, look instead at why are we worried about declining levels of childbearing at the moment. We live at a time when the globe is facing huge challenges in terms of environmental change, climate change, and our consumption levels. And it does seem quite odd to me that at the same time we are discussing trying to encourage people to have more children. In a way, we've given ourselves a breathing space here to tackle those real challenges to the globe and not just to humanity as a population. Let's tackle those. Let's get on top of that. Who knows? That may encourage people to have more children. There is some evidence that people do not feel too optimistic about the future, and certainly not optimistic enough to start bringing lots of children into what looks like a quite terrifying world.
Absolutely. I think decentralizing, when we're talking about decentralizing, climate change is a big conversation, and people think, okay, why do I want to bring a child into this world? And it's not the most stable of the circumstances. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time, and I shall move on to Dr. Lai. I think we'll circle back to you in a bit, though. Thank you. Dr. Lai, Regional Director, UNFPA, ASTRO. Dr. Lai is the current Arab States Regional Director of UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, assuming his duties in May 2016. He's a native of Palestine and has held a number of high-profile national and international public service positions over the last 2 decades. Within the UN system, in government and in the multilateral arena, in the areas of official statistics, population census, population and development, monitoring and evaluation, program management, and advocacy. So please, Dr. Lai, I understand that you have a presentation, or would you? Oh, you don't have. Okay, then. So maybe you don't know this, but I'll let you in on a little secret, which has published a report on infertility treatment, but it really looks at it from an Islamic ethics perspective. We did this in 2020, and really it was to address the questions that people have from an Islamic perspective on what are the merits and non-merits, so to speak, of seeking infertility treatment. So it does discuss some of the common ethical questions related to treating infertility in the Muslim world, such as the permissibility of egg freezing and IVF. So we know that in Islam and the Holy Quran, the capacity to procreate is depicted as a God-given gift, hiba. Do we see that religion still plays a role in the decision-making process when it comes to fertility in the Arab states? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this session. I'm very happy all the time to be with DeFi in these side events every year. Let me start by saying that from my perspective, the issue is not the decline of fertility. The issue is inequality, because not all countries are facing declining fertility. If we look globally at the population, the world population, now we are standing on 7.9 billion, and in the coming 30 years, we are still expected to increase by 2 billion. Therefore, the decline of fertility is a challenge and is a problem in some societies, particularly in Europe and some Latin American countries, and of course in Arab region, in the GCC countries. It is a challenge, but it's not the case in Yemen, it's not the case in Somalia, it's not the case in Africa. Therefore, globally, we don't feel that we have a problem, a serious problem of infertility. It looks like aging as well. Now, if we look at the decision of the parents, it's complex. It's an outcome. Decision is an outcome of an economic situation, social situation, the perceptions in the society, which is again another complex outcome that is becoming as a result of investment from the population, from the society, and from the government in creating the perception of parents about the number of children to be brought during the age of fertility for women through the households. Now, when it comes to religion, religion has a role, of course, but it is part of the whole cultural values that are created in the society. And I don't, from our experience working in UNFPA for a long time with the populations, we don't feel that the problem is a religious problem. It is a social norm problem, and it is an interpretation, because the social norms is much, much more stronger than religion in our lives from our perspective. Therefore, I think it's an issue of social norms, it's an issue of inequality, and also it's an issue on the trend moving to the individual thinking. People are more focused on their own lives, they are focused, I wouldn't want to say they are more selfish, but they are focusing more and more on how they are going to, when they decide the number of children, they would say, okay, what does that mean from economic perspective? The way how we are going to raise our children, the quality of life is becoming another issue, and the role of bigger family, the extended family, and the tribe is becoming less and less, and therefore the risk is becoming higher to take such decisions.
Thank you so much. Yes, totally. So 7 of the world's, thank you for your answers. I shall assimilate them in my next question. So 7 of the world's top 15 fertility declines have occurred in Arab countries. And so in your opinion, what do you think, besides the reasons that you've said, obviously one of them, I think it would be the satellite families now that we have, rather than the wider support, because the support system is very important to us in terms of when a mother goes back to work, who's going to take care of her children? And that's not an easy decision in any part of the world. So, but do you think that there is a lack of support built into Arab countries that you can experience in other countries, which would encourage parents to think about having children as an easier journey, I would take Sweden, for example, or places in Europe where the maternity leave is just so much longer and the flexible working hours. So do you think that those type of practices, or there are practices, again, I'll borrow what I asked George, is what can we do to incentivize that you feel that that's glaringly obvious in the Arab countries that we might have kind of got wrong?
I think we need to work, if we would like to go into more asking people more to go and think or rethink on the number of kids they would like to bring, we have to work on two parallel paths. The first one is the enabling environment for having kids. This includes all the facilitations that are offered, including the leaves, paternity and maternity. It includes the environment where women are able to raise children, but also still seek their own career. And they are not put in a situation where they have to choose. Because if they choose within this individualism thinking, definitely they will choose their own development. Therefore, this is one. The second one, we have to work on the social norms. This is a social norms matter. This is a values in the society. The society values needs to be invested in a way to create a new set of values that makes raising children is something positive, which is being in many, for decades, at least in the Arab region, it has been looked at as something negative. The well-educated people have less, the elite have less, and those people who are living in the lower classes are the ones who have bigger families. So this sort of values needs to be changed through a lot of work and investment in the society. And finally, whatever we are trying to is to help people to choose, but the choice is a matter that we cannot negotiate about. And states, countries, governments should in no way intervene in the decision of the families.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. So I would then kind of counter your answer with, do you think when we talk about social norms, we need to move forward and understand what social norms that we take from tradition that we could take forward would be valuable, and then recalibrate our thinking to be more inclusive of the male's, first of all, perspective, and second, role in parenting? Because if they take on a bigger role in parenting, maybe that balance, that parity will allow a mother to think that she can go to work, and a stay-at-home parent, for example, as you know, this is becoming more and more common, would be something that her husband could take on. And that sharing parenting, is that a message that you think that we should be fostering more within our part of the world? And
this is one, but also we have to value raising kids. Raising kids as a time that allocated to raise kids in the society is not valued. In the economy, it's not valued. In the social system, is not valued, or it's not valued as much as the paid work. If it becomes valued, then there is an incentive for women to spend more time raising kids, and also there will be competition with fathers also, or partners, to stay if this sort of work is valued from
maybe our policies don't signal the value that we place on it, and that's probably one of the first things. And the second one is we are forcing women to either have careers or have children, and that's probably the wrong way to go. So definitely the wrong way to go. But in the rush for female emancipation and for them to progress quite quickly, I think a lot of the messaging got lost, that having children is still one of the most incredible things that you can do, but you should be able to have more than that. You should be able to have the career. You shouldn't be having to choose. And a lot of women, and I'm going to be controversial here, a lot of their mothers feel as if the only way to progress forward is to have the career and not think so much about the children. And so I think the pendulum has to kind of swing back again and, try to encompass both. In any country where these things actually happen, where females enter the workplace increasingly and enter universities at a higher percentage, this does happen, that pendulum does swing and then right itself. And I think it's done that in many other countries. And I think we need to focus on the policies that help our generation to understand and focus on that. Thank you so much, Dr. Loy. I'm going to move on, but I will come back to you. So I'm about to introduce Dr. Sharifa Al-Imadi. Dr. Sharifa is currently the Executive Director of the Doha International Family Institute, DIFI, a global policy and advocacy institute working to advance knowledge on Arab families and promote evidence-based policies. She's a certified clinical psychologist and an expert in family counseling and in treating behavioral disorders, including drug addiction. Before joining DIFI, Dr. Al-Imadi was an executive director of international and community relations at Norfa Wellness, Recovery and Treatment Center, where she also worked as a family and clinical therapist. Prior to that, she was the executive director of the Protection and Social Rehabilitation Center from 2014 to 2017, and the director of therapy and rehabilitation at Al Aween Social Rehabilitation Center. Dr. Al-Imadi is a member of various relevant committees, including the National Committee for Narcotics Control in Qatar and the National Committee for Women, Children, the Elderly, and Persons with Disabilities. Dr. Al-Imadi holds a PhD in psychology and counseling from Manchester Metropolitan University. I believe Dr. Sharifa will be presenting data in a presentation, so please go ahead, Dr. Sharifa.
Yeah, Yusuf, you can just put my presentation. Thank you very much, Sultana. Really, what I will present is a finding of research that the international institution implemented, and it's like answering exactly what has been discussed between you, Sultana, and Professor George and Luay, but from people perspective from this country, which is we here in Qatar focus for in increasing the population, and maybe there is like a finding that answering some question already you asked here. So I will focus on this, in finding that focusing on equality comes first. So not everything in this finding. So next slide, I will try to give introduction and study objectives, the methodology and primary result, and some recommendation. Relate to the introduction, unlike most of developing countries, as I said, including Arab countries, which seek to limit the population growth rates, the state of Qatar seeks to increase these rates, given the decreasing fertility rates as well as the decreasing percentage of citizens among the total population. And we can see from the growth how fertility rate, or a graph, sorry, fertility rates decreased over years from 1986 at 5.3 to 2.9 in 2017. And we can see this is what's happening even globally, as you said, Sultana. Next slide, please. The study objectives focus on identify the factors that affect the decline in fertility rates among the Qatari community, benchmark the international best practice in terms of policy and programs, suggest policies and programs that support raising the current fertility rates, or at least stop this their decline. With methodology, we used mixed method, qualitative and quantitative based, but I will focus here more in the qualitative, as we explain that we already working in qualitative, a quantitative one. We were used in the qualitative was on proposed sample of 58 Qataris, 30 females and 28 males, with different education background, employment status, marital status. As I said, this presentation will only focus on the primary findings of the qualitative phase. We are working, as I said, with the Planning and the Statistics Authority to develop a national survey which will cover 2,300 households. Beside the qualitative and quantitative finding, the study adopted secondary data analysis to examine all data related to fertility, marriage, divorce, and extra. Benchmark analysis to map the international best practice. If we will go to the result, the primary result of the question, what are the factors that affect the fertility decision? There is like personal factors. Most of the participants compared their preference towards limited the number of children. And this is what Professor George said, that if we will put policies but still the couples want to have less children. It's not the country or the government decision. So there is different reason to that with the Qatari population, the parenting responsibility. So the major of them was said like the quote of quality over quantity, and this is why we choose to have this even title for our session, because most of the participants were focusing more on quality than quantity, where the participant highlighted the importance of investing in good education for children and positive parenting style. Also, participants highlighted, like a quote, parents don't avoid the responsibility of having children rather than realizing upbringing and the difficulties that come with parenting. Another participant mentioned quality upbringing, quality parenting, it's matter. Another factor, which is increased awareness and change in perception of the people. Most of the participants indicated the change in circumstance and perceptions that previously encouraged having the biggest number of children possible, where now the awareness increased that the proper upbringing of children is more important than their number. Also, some female participants referred to the impact of women's education and employment on limiting the number of children, as you said, or you mentioned, Sultana, giving that women are now more ambitious in attending higher education and a successful career. Next slide. Economic factors focused on cost of upbringing. Most of the female participants confirmed the impact of children's education and medical care and the decision of number of children, along with some male participants. Also, the impact of increased family incomes, as increased income comes with increased desire for a luxury life with less children. They mentioned also the impact of increased or decreased house space, which is 15 females and 9 males agreed that the house space impacts the decision of the number of children. The quotes say, one of them, I feel yes, because this is the place where the family will live and it will be for a certain number of children. Some house, of course, impacts the decision. Like next slide, structural and contextual factors for, let's say, the lifestyle. As for men, the availability of higher income and the desire to live a certain type of life without being committed to, it affects the decision. So this is even one of the reasons. Also, they mentioned the reason of increased rate of divorce. So the frequent answer, especially from the female participant, mentioned the woman's awareness and independence and her preference not to live with someone she doesn't like. giving that divorce is no longer a big issue for women, while a number of male participants referred to the higher number of requests by women adopt accumulation, families intervention, and the conflict between the values of the new generation and the traditional and custom. This is also one of the factors that Dr. Laid mentioned. In addition, participants from both genders refer to the mechanism of choosing the life partner and the insufficient contact before marriage, which is even a big issue relate to many participants in this research, like Saad, who's divorced, said a defect in the mechanism of choosing a partner, a failure in understanding the goal of marriage, a lack of investment in understanding the other partner in and understanding of principles, prioritize and future plans before the engagement. So this is another issues. Relate to educational factors, also it is the lifestyle and how it is important to for a better or quality education for their children. So participants explore the rates relation between the next slide, education factors, please. Between education factors such as couple education, women's education and employment, and whether having a higher education level than the men can have an impact on the decision. Also, level of couples education and the number of children, which is even we mentioned before, most of the participants confirmed that the increased level of the couple's education can influence limiting the number of children, like for example 22 females and 10 males confirmed, while 7 males and 3 females did not see the relation. One quote from Abu Shahab explained education and employment factors go hand in hand and not education on its own. So here, even from this quote, we can understand that here in Qatar, we see husband or male partner always like encourage female to finish her education and to like take like a better job, so for better life in the family. So here Abu Shab saying, my wife complete her graduate study and worked in the public sector. I cannot force her to quit her job. Yet both my work and her makes us give less to our children. These are some of the reasons, in addition to the quality of upbringing, which made us decide on having only 3 children. Another factors relate to education, which wife higher education than husband. Most of the participants did not agree that a woman tend to have less children if her level of education was more than her husband. However, few participants mentioned that there might be a relation, as she will be carrying more or caring more for her career path. If we will relate to the health factors, this session looked into the impact of Qatari families' lifestyle on fertility and sterility. The use of modern biological technology, like healthy lifestyle and fertility rates. 20 females and 10 males agreed that the Qatari females' lifestyle affect the fertility rates, while 7 males and 6 females denying that relationship. The answer focused on the importance of working out and improving the overall health, which help in having healthy children. Laziness and obesity can negatively impact fertility. A quote from Abu Abdulaziz: yes, if the couple is in better healthy, then the fertility rates might be higher. Some of the participants linked the unhealthy lifestyle of the Qatari family, unhealthy food, the lack of exercising, to the increased cases of sterility in men and women. With biomedical treatment and the increase of genetic technology use, almost of the participants confirmed that they know cases in their families where they are treated from sterility by the genetic and reproductive technologies. Participant said, like a quote from one of the participants, I see a lot around me who had delays in having children, although the medicine has evolved. There are a lot of cases that is being treated. This can be due to patterns of unhealthy diet, not being used to exercise, and so on. So this is one, even one of the big issues we're facing here in the culture. Fitness and outfit impact on reproduction, which is related more to female. On another hand, like finding shows that women's interest in staying fit and in shape may limit the number of children they plan to have. Luxury can negatively affect having children through increased travel and the desire to enjoy life before having them, and feeling sufficient with fewer children. With the next slide, recommendation, we have different, like more than what I will present here as a recommendation, but I'm focusing just to recommendation that will focus on equality via quantity, which is awareness level. Conduct a national awareness campaign, including several programs on media, education, cultural activities, religious discourses, NGO projects to address the value change and highlight personal factors affecting fertility decline. With financial level, we need to address a set of financial support policies for the cost of marriage, housing cost, and children, including additional education and health support. With the work-family balance policies, as I think we discussed, even Dr. Laay maybe, introduce a set of policy to address a full work-family balance framework, including revisiting level policies, children arrangement, and flexible working arrangement. For the health aspect, formulate a national committee to examine all health aspects related to fertility and sterility and act accordingly. These are the primary recommendation. As I said, they will be consolidated into detailed policy upon a completion of a quantitative phase. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharifa. A lot to unpack there. Really interesting data. I wanted to ask a question that was almost before one gets married, and that is men who choose not to get married. And the reason is because they don't want to have children. I wonder if we've ever done a study like that, because I know myself of some Qatari males who choose not to get married because they don't want to have children. They'd like to have a partner. And this supposition is always that a person who does get married should have children, and every woman would want to have a child. So I was wondering if we'd ever done any study in that area. And the other thing was, which you alluded to, is infertility, so the inability to have children. And some people feel very stigmatized in going to seek help, so they just leave it and hope it gets better, or they don't do anything about it. So those are the two kind of questions I kind of wanted to ask you, stemming from your data. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sultana. Really, it's very important to question relate to now adults don't like to get married, and we have like research in a perception of marriage with the youth. They feel that they want to finish their study, they want to finish or to do their work, they have their own salary, especially female, and they don't want to live with the responsibility. One of the responsibility of marriage to have children. in the future. So we're working, we have finding of what you said, and it's there is like a numbers of young people who's talking about these challenges, and they say that this is our life, we're enjoying our life, why we will bring responsibility to ourselves. As a psychologist, I feel this is what the parenting style that we focused to grow our children to focus in their career and their study, while don't like even mention how it is their responsibility to have like family and to have the children. So one of the reason. Another thing that they I think financially they are
prioritizing themselves.
Yeah, financially the woman, especially now, she don't she can live by herself, she can enjoy her life, so why she will bring like a responsibility to her, and that's why even explain the increase of divorce rate, as you said, as you saw that one of the quotes that now women don't scared from like divorce. It's not a big problem for her. So that's because like the society accepted this, and there is increase in divorce rate. So even one of the reasons that like decrease the fertility. Another, the second question you mentioned, or part, I forgot it, just Sultana remind me.
About infertility, that there is infertility and people don't want to address it, they'd rather just not talk about it.
This is one of the issues that I wanted to focus in this research, because most of the, as a woman, I feel that most of the researcher focus in that woman, she wants to finish her study, she wants to take better job, and she don't want the responsibility of having different children. While I can see around myself that there is a problem of fertility from health perspective. That's why in this study focus on that, and really we need to study more, and we go in deep. I think it can help in that because this is even a part of your goals to understand this from health perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it is very important to study that, because it's unfair to talk about social aspects while there is like health problems, and we have to focus, and it's relate, most of that relate to lifestyle, to diet, to exercising, all these.
And also an awareness. I think it matters, and I think women need to be aware of the fact that, you know, there are solutions out there, and they should not feel embarrassed. And sometimes, you know, the one thing that we found really interesting when we looked at fertility treatments was that it's not overwhelmingly women who are infertile. Yeah. The problem could be 50-50, and in many cases it is. I'm going to jump to Professor Leeson and ask you a bit of a controversial question. In terms of why the state cares, because of the financial burden of having the elderly take care of, you know, the younger generation taking care of the elderly. When you look at a social welfare system, obviously it was constructed with the replacement rate in mind. So, you know, if you have a system like in England, where you have a pension scheme, you also have an equal workforce to compensate. And when that is skewed, you obviously put a lot of burden on the state. But don't the states also now feed their own agenda in a way? Because once they told us not to have children, and now they want us to have children. And so where is our autonomy in this? So that's my question to you. Do you feel our autonomy is sometimes lost within the agenda of what states want, basically?
Yes, Sultan. I think the messaging is hugely important here. And as you say, we were told to have fewer children. Now we're being told to have more children. We were told to retire early. If you remember, back in the 1970s and the 1980s, we were told to retire early. Now we're being told to carry on working if not forever, then for as long as possible.
Yeah.
The messaging does get confusing, and I think what we've listened to this afternoon, and particularly I'd like to say to Sharifa, what a wonderful piece of research, and I think what you talked us through this afternoon has highlighted just how complex this is. It is so unbelievably complex that it all does ultimately, in a way, boil down to individuality. And also, I think what Dr. Loué mentioned earlier, it's all about enabling choice. And I think that is the ultimate goal of any government that has any sort of responsibility, as it should have, for providing welfare and quality of life for every single one of its citizens, regardless.
Absolutely.
That's the ultimate aim of government.
Yeah.
And once we do that, and once we get that messaging right, that this is not about saying to women, stay at home and have 6 children. No. This is about saying, look, you want work and family life balance? We can provide that. You want childcare? We can provide that. But as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, that does lead us also into a situation where we have to accept that some people will say, well, I actually don't want to have children.
And not ostracize women for saying that, because I think that there's always going to be a sense of, I can't say that because society will judge me if I say I don't. And maybe if that conversation was had more often, men would be more inclined to get married and think, okay, I won't be judged for saying I don't want to have a child. I just want to have a partner, which is, for in our society, that's not the way to go. But it is. I mean, in many countries where there is a problem with overpopulation, having the partner would be, just the thing that they need rather than having the child or adopting. And that's always going to be a choice. So thank you. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Please go ahead. I can't hear you.
I just have one thing. So a few years ago, there was a Eurobarometer survey carried out by the European Commission. And the member states of the European Union were also concerned about declining levels of fertility and wanted to understand, as you're explaining, Sharifa, you'd like to understand why are people not having children? What are the decisions behind this? Or why are they not having as many children as previous generations had? And what was interesting about the results from that survey was that unfortunately for governments, the reasons that were being given were not the sort of reasons that you could make policy on, if you like. It was, they've never had these, people hadn't had these conversations before entering into any sorts of partnerships or marriages or whatever about children, and therefore, I now discover that my partner actually never wanted to have children, and therefore we have an issue.
Absolutely.
Let's not forget, that demographics, as we've said many times, is complex. Part of lower levels of childbearing, part of it is that we're delaying as well having that first child.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always thought that was an interesting question. It was my question to Dr. Lai next. So you've cheated a bit, but I will put this question to Dr. Lai. In terms of people getting married and then having children in the Arab states, have you seen an increase in that waiting period from the marriage to that decision to have a child? I've seen it in households amongst us because people want to have a better, more set relationship or be sure that they've got the right type of household to have that child. Have we seen an increase in that, so to speak, waiting period from marriage to having first child within the Arab states? You're muted.
Actually, this was WHO's method in the 70s to make family planning and to solve this paradox between having sex and have kids. And it didn't work in the Arab region in the past. I don't have sincerely recent data if people use this spacing at the beginning of the marriage as a matter to understand. But I think in many countries in the region, there is pressure from the bigger families on having the first kid as soon as possible, at least to ensure that there is no problem. Allow me, Sultana, to go back to Sharifa's presentation because it has provoked me. What has been presented as reasons, in my opinion, are correlations, associations, but not causal. Because I cannot claim that the more women are educated, the more likelihood to have children, which means I cannot use women to be the fault of this infertility. It is not. And it is the problem of the society to have solutions for women to pursue their career and to pursue their education and to have kids. But we should not, as a society, in any way, go and push women to choose between their own fitness or own health or their own career or to have children. This is unfair. And I'm sure that the study didn't conclude that, because it meant this. There is an association, of course. More educated women have less kids because women have no support from the family. They have less support from the society and less support from the enabling environment. And also the relationship between the level of education of women and level of education of husband, the wife and husband, it's more likely for marriage not to happen, but not to have less children. This is the literature in the.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're touching on a topic that's, within the marriage setting, but beyond that, obviously, there is the unwillingness to even get married, which is a whole new topic. And I'm sure Sharifa has a lot of data on that. But,
absolutely,
just within the marriage setting, it itself, we're looking at the complexities of that. But beyond that, there is, or before that, let's say, people are choosing not to get married, which is a whole new set of problems, really.
And you, Sultana, mentioned a very important concept, which is the autonomy, bodily autonomy. It goes both ways. On one hand, maybe the more control you have on your body, while you don't have the most on childbearing and all that stuff, might lead to less likelihood to get more kids. But on the other hand, the power that imposed on women and take decisions on their bodies, without their own choice is also an important barrier. In some countries, women, for example, are unable to get married from other nationalities. This limits the choices of women. Therefore, I go back to what George said, that the power of choice is the most important in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lai, I wanted to ask you another question. In terms of the role of grandparents in fostering the right type of environment to encourage the thought process that having a family is a good thing. Where do you see them sitting within this debate? And also Islamic scholars, because there are amazing scholars, I could name a few, especially in Qatar, who actually deconstruct this from an Islamic point of view that persuades us in a way to act in a certain way. And I think in terms of families, how can they provide that type of support or guidance? How do you see the role of grandparents, so to speak, and Islamic scholars? Sorry, a two-pronged question to you here.
Both of them are come within the broader title of the social norms, because the grandmamas and grandfathers, as well as the religious scholars, both are instrumentals in creating the social norm. The social norms that has been so far pushed over decades in the Arab region is towards reducing the number of kids. If we would like to balance the number of people with the wealth, for example, for a certain country like Qatar, there should be a lot of work on the values of having more kids. The contribution, and the success at certain point in time in our societies, some decades ago, the success of the woman is if she is able to get somebody to get her to engage her, then she succeeded. The society used to judge women from this perspective. Mm-hmm. Now we have to create a situation where the success of a family is with the number of kids they brought to the society as contribution to the continuity of the nature.
Very interesting. Yes, absolutely. I think that the judgment part is the part that needs to be replaced by the understanding of how you cope with the anxieties of today using the values of yesterday. I think luckily in Qatar, we have such a strong association with extended family. They can be used in a way to spread a more positive message, or as educators, actually, of the past and how that can still apply to the future. That's really interesting. Thank you, Dr. Lai. Dr. Sharifa, back to you. I wanted to ask you, how has the pandemic affect fertility or infertility within our country and also within the region? If there's any data you have, I'd be really interested to know about it.
Yeah, I think there is no data because as a researcher, I have to come answer this question with the data. But let's talk as
anecdotally. Let's talk anecdotally.
Yeah, we can see that the research shows that there is increase in violence, increase in conflict because of what they're facing, increase in economic problems, but this is not what is Qatari situation, because we did a research related to before and after the pandemic related to adolescent well-being, and we found that the violence, at least the violence, it's decreased. Also, we heard from family counseling center, even the conflict decreased in this situation. So I don't have research, as I said, to answer your question, but what we saw around us, that family become more closer to each other. They understand each other, and I think they decide to have children during that time. So I cannot tell you the number, but what we can see around us. So I think because I can't say that this is globally something can happen global, because the situation of Qatar is different. During the pandemic, everything was solved in health sectors, and there is no problems for at least the citizen relate to losing their job or even losing any business or anything. So I think this has made them staying together, living their life more close to their even extended family, as you said. So yeah, this has helped them to think more. Relate to Dr. Lai, even discussion related to our findings. What we face here in Qatar as a researcher, that you will feel when you ask about family, I can see that woman in Qatar, she criticizes herself. She take the responsibility. When you ask, even we ask for policies for paternity leave, most of female didn't accept paternity leave. They said they will go and struggle and leave the children. So if you will see that the answer of the question in our research, women who take this responsibility and talk about her study, her work, and how this decrease the number of children that she want to have. This is one of the things that we facing. So what you will see, this is their perception. This is what they think. So I think we need more. That's why we said we need more awareness.
Absolutely. So it's discouraging to think that 5 years ago, when we did a mini survey and asked women if they would like to have paternity leave, and they said no, because our husband will go to Dubai on holiday, hasn't changed in 5 years. It's still the same mindset, which is a little bit worrying in terms of, no, absolutely. That's really interesting. I think, so I'm good. Professor Leeson, I'm going to go back to you. And, I think the question is, again, how do we kind of look at, and I said to you, how do we incentivize couples to have children? But I suppose the question is more, I don't know if you remember, you probably do, that in schools they used to teach you how to be a parent. And I know that in Qatar, they still do that to a lesser degree now, but not as much as they used to, but they still do it. Do you think those type of awareness within schools sends the right type of message to the importance of being a parent? Or even if you're not going to be a parent, you could adopt a child. Do you think that we've dropped the ball there by taking that out of the curriculum? And so that doesn't reinforce the message that families or having children matter as averse to education. And now you've got machine learning and everything else that's going on. So obviously the curriculum is government identifying need. So has government dropped the ball in identifying the need when it comes to educating children on parenting and also what to expect from their parents in some ways?
Good question. Has government dropped the ball? Yeah, I think a lot of governments in a lot of places have dropped a lot of balls in recent years. And, I'm a little reluctant to buy into the idea that we should be incentivizing couples. I'm very reluctant to buy into that. I'm sorry.
So Professor Leeson, I'll interject here and I'll say, I don't think it's incentivizing. I think it's allowing somebody, giving somebody the ingredients and the recipe to cook. Whether they cook that meal or not is entirely up to them. But once you take something away, you've also not given them the right. So I'll give you my daughters as a really good example. They are quite career driven, but I've insisted that they learn to cook, and they said, "Oh, but who learns to cook now?" I said, my sons and daughters should all learn to cook, because I'm equipping you with the skills that you need. Whether you use them or not, that's your choice. But for me to not tell you anything about housekeeping or to learn to cook or be self-sufficient, let's say, I'm also taking the choice away from you. I've almost made the choice for you. So I don't think I would say it's incentivizing. I think it's equipping people with the knowledge base, and what they choose to do with it is really up to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I only use the word incentivize because that was how you introduced your question to me.
Sorry, I shall remove the word incentivize and reframe the question. Please go ahead.
So, and I think you've raised a really important issue, actually, and not so much about cooking, but about the role of education, and also the role of government in actually determining the sort of syllabuses that children are then presented with in schools. And again, ultimately, I think the most important role of education is to equip us all as citizens with all of the skills, as far as that is possible, that we need to be good citizens. And if one of those skills is understanding what family means, let's face it, the family as a concept has changed completely over the last 2 or 3 generations. It means something totally different to young generations today from what it did to generations, 2 or 3 generations ago. So the concept of family has changed. If we think it's important, we have to have a good message as to why family is important. The next level is, okay, families is not just you and your partner and your parents and grandparents, but it's also looking down to children you may have. Why is that important? It can be important as an individual, the whole idea of satisfaction from having a child and the knowledge that you are sort of procreating and life goes on beyond you. That sort of philosophical, religious, or whatever you want to call it, idea, I think, is important. I think what we don't want to do is to, I find it really difficult to buy into the idea that we should be talking about the economics of why we should be having children.
I agree. I think that's a very cold and sterile argument to have, and as soon as you say that, the government relays the message that it's not about your welfare that I'm worried about, it's our state of financial health that we're worried about. So I think that yeah, obviously the messaging, so the messaging needs to be recalibrated in a way that's approachable, and also I'm rephrasing really, something that people can recognize as relevant to their life today. Because I remember a study on why family matters that Diffie did 10 odd years ago, and it was very compelling. And one of them was the role of the grandparents and how they anchor families. And so I think maybe another study on why families matter that's generationally relevant might be a really good way to start that off, Sharif, in terms of spreading awareness. I'm very conscious of the fact we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to go back to thank you so much, Dr. Leeson, Professor Leeson. Dr. Loay, I'm going to put a scenario to you. So when they asked Angela Merkel 3 or 4 years into being Chancellor, why is it that more women have decided to stay at home rather than be in the workplace, or there is an increase in the amount of women that are staying at home rather than choosing to go back to work? And she said, because you don't understand freedom of choice. Because freedom of choice is giving them the choice. And if they decide to stay at home, that means I've done my job. I have equipped them to be able to sit at home and raise a child, which is the most important thing for them. And if they choose to go back, the workplace is always going to be there for them. But we've given them enough choices and enough support system for us to be able to do that. Do you think that's what we need in our part of the world? That's the gold standard that we should be aiming for?
Absolutely. The power of choice and the enabling environment to make this choice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, you did say that. You're right. Dr. Sharifa, last words.
Thank you very much. You said everything, Sultana. Thank you for you and for Dr. Loay, Professor George. It is a really interesting discussion. And I think we came with the different ideas of even more research in this aspect. And I think like the quantitative phase of this research will give more depth information and exactly what's your concern and question relate to this. Also, we have to take all this information, all these results, and advocate for different policies, especially, let's say, in Arab region, which is DFI focus on to support. And what's the last word you said, the choice of, we as a woman, especially, we can choose to bring up our children or to go in the work, and we even need different policy to support us and upbringing our children at the same time doing our work, because as we know, even in Qatar especially, or in GCC countries, most of the women have higher education and they are in different fields, and the countries they need them to be with man to support their country and the economic and all the aspects of life. So I cannot say more than that.
Except for let's do another study on why families matter. I think that would be really interesting.
It's very important. I think.
I think we're wrapping up now. So that was the last comments. Thank you, everybody. It was a really rich discussion. Thank you for your support, all the stakeholders, and Mr. Jassim, especially Dr. Loai, Professor Leeson, and Dr. Sharifa for pulling everything together. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this.
Thanks goes to you. Wonderful moderation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.